Also, just Ibrox expansion. That was obviously another popular topic that's been discussed. It's been discussed for years, but they haven't confirmed that. Basically, they had a survey of fans to ask them what they wanted. They've done some feasibility studies, and they're even at the point now where they're discussing things with architects. I think the sort of preferred option would be to sink the Ibrox pitch, and that would sink it down a few metres, and that would allow them to put in an extra sort of 5,000-6,000 seats. I think we've discussed this a million times before. Things like the water table with the Clyde being nearby is one of the big sort of hurdles they need to overcome, but they're confident that is something they can do. Obviously, I think that's important because when you look at Celtic just in the match day revenue stakes, we know how much with Scottish football not having the huge TV deal, match day revenue accounts for so much of their income. Celtic having 60,000 seats compared to Rangers only at 52,000, that gives them 8,000 seats worth of additional income that Rangers can't generate. So if they can close that gap anyway, allow them in a financial sense to get closer to Celtic, that may be worth another couple of players that they can bring in. And then just finally, I think obviously the referees issue, obviously the big talking point of yesterday's game was the penalty that Hibs got. Soft, I think, is the best way to describe it. Pragmat was speaking about that. He was certainly he was quizzed at one moment by a fan who used the word that Rangers were cheated, and I don't think Marat was responding specifically to that word, but I think he was responding to the fact that Rangers fans could feel aggrieved by that. He certainly couldn't understand why the penalty was given, and Jim Gillespie was speaking as well. I think a lot of fans expect them every time there's a decision goes against Rangers, that they want to see a statement. They want to see the club going tonto and
bring back Tim Trainer.
Yeah. I'll let you use that phrase, Keith. But Jim Gillespie was making the point that basically they are forceful behind the scenes, but they can't be returned to that. I think it was John Bennett called them statement FC. They've got to get away from that. They can't be the ones screaming and shouting and having a tantrum in public every time. They'll be forceful behind the scenes, but if you keep just going out and howling at the moon, it turns people off. That's not how you win friends and influence people. You have to be a bit cute about it. You have to play the game a bit more. You have to try and take people along with you. If you've got criticisms, if you've got complaints, you have to do it in a more constructive way, a more civil way, rather than just blasting every time a decision goes against you. And that's the way that they're trying to do it. They're trying to politic better, basically. I think the days of the Rangers just launching, lambasting people at SFA and at Hampden every 2 minutes or over. They're going to try and do this in a more grown-up fashion, because I think that's what has to be done. The previous way that they did under the previous board, it won them no friends, it won them no favours. They're trying to get people to come to their way of thinking by playing it a bit cuter.
That's good to hear.
Just before we let you go, Andy, and this is maybe a question for both you guys, following the shareholder meeting today and obviously listening to what you said, Andy, is there still, do you believe, the general consensus that these guys in charge of the club will get it right?
From my point of view, I think the fans appreciate what they're doing, but I think they remain hugely sceptical of whether or not they can achieve it. Listen, I still think you look at their track record, the guys involved in the 49ers, they're involved with Leeds. Yeah, they've shown that once they get a handle on the situation, they can get themselves to a place where they're successful. I think they came in, I think they were hugely naive in some of the things they did. I think some of the decisions were made for them. I think Marat, basically admitted that today. For example, the appointment of Russell Martin. I think the club were, because of the length it took the takeover to complete, and Keith will remember this, having worked in the story so close to the last year, that basically, Patrick Stewart and Kevin Thelwell were left to basically run that recruitment process by themselves. And by the time the Americans finally get the keys to Ibrox, the decision was kind of already made, and they kind of had to go with it. And I think on reflection, they would might have paused that, as much as it would have been, problematic, because the season was coming around so quick. But they've learned a lot. I still think there's certain things that they could have done better, that they should have read the room better. Things like Kevin Thirlwell's son being appointed to the club, I thought that was a huge PR own goal. But I think they're quick learners. Listen, you don't achieve the kind of level of success these guys have had in various business worlds if you're not smart people. They will get a handle on this. The trouble is, though, that whilst they're learning, if they're not winning, the temperature around Ibrox just rises and rises. And the thing I have, they said today that we are not afraid of making change, but I think there's still an element that they can be forced into change. You look at Russell Martin, right? He had to go, but Danny Rowe, as much as I still don't think he was 100% the best fit, they backed him until it became clear that the fans just weren't Danny Rowe. And that's when they decided to, as soon as Salzburg came on and offer, they were happy to gobble it up. If they really felt, as Andrew Kavanagh said they did when he sat down with the media just at the end of last season, that they felt Danny Rowe was their best man, then they would have told Salzburg to bolt. But they didn't. I wonder if they can still be swayed by fan opinion. And that's my only concern around them. If there's a bad set of results in terms of how they deal with Derek McInnes, if Derek McInnes has a really bad start, if this run without a win continues, are they going to get sort of jumpy like they did last season? I think that's still the big question mark over them. I think if they're really steadfast in their beliefs, and it has appeared that they've jumped about a bit. I mean, how do you go from Russell Martin to Danny Rowe to Derek McInnes in the space of 12 months? That tells me that your decision making, as much as they're still learning, they're not quite set on what they want from Rangers. I think that's still the question mark. They still need to establish what they want to achieve with Rangers and how they want to achieve it.
I would just on that, Keith, again, sorry Andy, before we let you go, I would echo that, and I would just say, I don't think Rangers knows what kind of club it wants to be. I mean, the past 5 years, the chairman, the vice chairman, the sporting director, the technical director, they've all changed. Manager changes, 6 seasons running it changes. Head coach to manager to head coach.
They've had a complete identity crisis. You're right. And do you know what I think that Andy was getting at there, and certainly I would believe, I think it's taken, the first and foremost, they had to get the business deal done. Their eye was off the ball, they delegated big decisions, they made bad mistakes because of that, they trusted people they shouldn't have trusted. There's been all sorts of missteps along the way, but I do feel that now they've got their feet under the table, that's far more hands-on approach. They understand priority number one now is winning games of football. I think they've moved in exactly the right direction with Derek McInnes. I think that if he's given time, I think that they will rediscover the identity. They will rediscover it. It was lost along the way. There's been a whole shower of charlatans went up and down that front door and up and down the staircase in there over an extended period of time, going way back to when. And along the way, the identity of the football club was absolutely stamped into the carpet. Gone. But this is now about rebuilding. It's like we talked about yesterday with Celtic. You go into Lennoxtown as a new player, there's Callum McGregor, there's James Forrest, there's people around the place who live and breathe Celtic. Rangers need to get back to that, and I think that's what the whole Derek McInnes project is about. It's about trying to reconnect. And I think they'll get there, and I think they've made a good appointment. I don't think Danny Rowe was ever going to get it. I don't think he understood what the club was about. I think I know that Derek McInnes does, and I think that what he's trying to do right now is sift through all the deadwood and the carnage and the leftovers from all these other regimes and bad mistakes. And yes, it's going to require a bit of time to put these building blocks down and then start to progress Rangers. But he has to do that, as Andy rightly says, in an environment where patience is already exhausted. So it's not easy stuff, but I think Rangers will move in the right direction now. I think the Americans have got a far better idea this season, what's required than they did this time last season, put it that way.